I'm like kind of a numbers person, and I think, wow, so now they can save more for retirement or like pay off debt or this and that. And it compounds over the course. It's truly changing the trajectory of their career and their life, and their family's life if they have family or partners.
And we are back. I am Dr. Chris Parker. This is the UX Usability Podcast. It is fantastic to be speaking to you again. And we've got an incredible season 4 lineup ready. We're kicking off today talking to Sarah Doody about not just portfolios that she's known for, but just working in the UX industry, changing your life, changing your career, and just taking yourself to the next level. It is a fantastic podcast episode. I really hope that you enjoy it as much as I enjoy just listening to it again. Now, we got together a few months ago and had a chat about this. So it's been a bit longer than we wanted to, but we all know what's been happening in the world. Today, it's really great news for us in the UK. We've heard that COVID restrictions are going to be going. We're starting to get back to normal after what's been an incredibly draining few years. I'm sure all of us feel like the passion and time we used to have has just been evaporated over this time. But we can look forward to regaining a great part of what we had and look forward to those futures. So I really hope that today's episode gives you some inspiration to go forward and capture that. So without further ado, let's get down to it. Let's listen to my conversation with Sarah. I know this is going to change your career, change your life, and change what you think about UX design. So Sarah, thank you for joining us on the podcast, and we're excited to hear about all the ideas. Now I'm going to get started with your LinkedIn profile. It starts with helping UX people find their path, get unstuck, and get paid for what they're worth. What does that mean to you?
Well, great question, because I just updated that last Thursday or Wednesday, so it's fresh out of my mind. I updated that because my business has taken a turn, I guess, or my career really has taken a turn in the last couple of years where I no longer just do UX consulting. I've also ended up creating my own product related to coaching UX professionals through getting their next role or planning that next job search. So I wanted my LinkedIn profile to reflect that and also be a good model for all of my career coaching clients.
Is this the UX portfolio formula?
Well, I'm having honestly a bit of a branding crisis if you Google me online, because yes, I do have an online program called the UX Portfolio Formula. And I started that back in 2017. Maybe we'll talk about the history of that. It's kind of interesting because it's a good entrepreneurial story, but that program did literally what the title says. It helped people make a portfolio. And then I realized everyone needed more help than just creating a portfolio, right? They need resume and LinkedIn, and how do I reach out to, hiring managers at companies? So now I have a new program called the Career Strategy Lab, which is beyond just the portfolio. And it's really a 6-month in-depth coaching program that takes people through the process of literally doing every single conceivable thing needed to either be ready to be applying to jobs and interviewing, or be ready in case an opportunity kind of falls into your sphere one day.
Okay, so I'm a new graduate, maybe I've just finished a master's in UX design. I'm looking to work in one of these big tech companies, and there's loads of resources online. I maybe have a careers library I can speak to. Why do I need this strategy lab?
Great question. I have been thinking about this a lot recently because As a UX person and as a product owner, I probably am almost maybe excessively collecting data about my students, and not collecting data in a creepy way. I should point that out. More trying to understand, who they are, where they come from, and really to answer your question, why did they decide to join this career coaching thing I made? Because I found that I have people who fit the profile you just said, right? Just graduated from a master's program. I also have people who have been working in user experience for 15 years or so, which honestly really blew my mind. And the resounding theme is that there is a lot of information out there online. It's very overwhelming. It's often contradictory. And at the end of the day, it really just scratches the surface, and it might tell you in broad strokes what to do, such as tell a story, show your process, etc. But very few of those resources tell you how to do it. And my program takes it a step further and gives you the resources for how to do that, such as Google Doc templates for writing good, better, best resume bullet points, for example, and then curated examples of, hundreds of different slides from portfolios and things. So I've really just taken it to the next level. I think if my students were here, they would say that, because they've said they're blown away by the depth of what I've created.
So can you talk me through the user journey of this person who's joined the course and they're wanting to get to the next level but don't quite know how to make it?
Yes, great question. So earlier this morning, I was writing some text about this, but the irony of this whole thing is that most of these UX professionals have not been applying UX to their own career. And, you could take that a step further and say to their own lives, right? And because we do this all day long, we're always researching and doing design thinking and all these things, iterating for what we work on every day. But are we really hitting kind of pause for our own career to do that? And I think for most of us, the answer is no, right? Because we are so busy meeting deadlines and trying to do all of the things that we never sit back and think, where do I want to be, 3 years from now? Because if you're thinking of getting hired in the next 6 months, let's say, but you also are thinking you want to be, say, a lead UX researcher in 3 years, that job you take next, it has to be very strategic in order to get you that experience that you can put on your resume to then look qualified as whatever the example I just said, a lead UX researcher or whatever it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
So part of that journey is really creating what I call a career roadmap. And I kind of describe it as a user research journey or user research project on yourself. And so it involves some self-evaluation. It involves going out to former colleagues or managers that you have a good relationship with, or former clients, and asking them really research questions to help understand potentially even blind spots about yourself, right? I know in my career, people have pointed out strengths and weaknesses that maybe I thought, I'm great at this. And then they say, you're not really great at that. Or I'm not good at this. And they say, no, you are really good at that. So this whole career roadmap then serves as kind of a compass for everything else. But it's like, if you were making a product and you didn't have a product strategy and you didn't do research, well, what happens? We all know what happens. It doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. So do you think people don't have that kind of self-reflection going on naturally that they need help with?
I think a lot of people are great at dreaming and maybe having larger aspirations for their career, such as I want to work at Facebook, Apple, Google, etc., or kind of grandiose type ideas, right? I want to have an impact on the world, change people's lives, all these feel good things. But to make it more concrete, and then to break that down into, well, what are your goals for this year? And then how do you prioritize those goals to figure out what you should be doing, this quarter? Because here's a good example. A lot of people come to me and say, well, I think I need to learn to code. And after some conversation, it really comes out, my question is, why do you think you need to learn to code? Well, I read some articles, or so-and-so told me this or that. I said, well, tell me about where you want to be in your career. And it doesn't involve coding. So I think a lot, because the UX industry is kind of, what is the right way to say this? Kind of unregulated is the wrong word. Let's face it, it's kind of a free-for-all. And so you are in education too. And yes, there are some very standardized education programs and certifications, yet at the same time, a massive amount of the education out there is unvetted and unregulated, for lack of a better word. So because of that, I think it makes it very muddy for people trying to figure out their career. And that's why this career roadmap is proving to be really helpful, because like I said, if you were making a product and you didn't have any product strategy or research to back it up on, it's like, what are you basing every decision off of? It's just assumption or what the founder, thought when they woke up in the morning.
Oh yeah, I could totally relate to the unregulated world of UX. So not long ago,
it's a whole other podcast.
Oh God, yeah. So not long ago, I published a research paper with one of my PhD students, really fantastic guy called James Branch. We're looking at just what are UX courses teaching and what are UX jobs asking for. And there was some alignment, but over the globe, it's a mess. And you think, well, why is this? It's because universities tend to go, well, we're a computer science group. We know what's good for development. Let's just UXify what we've got. Or you're a company and go, well, we've been doing interaction design since the 90s. We know this stuff. Let's get some of this new fairy dust. And it's just, these things are drawing. Do you see that as a strength or weakness of the UX field?
Goodness, it's such a toss-up, because I think it is great that there is this heightened awareness of the need to, quote, design things. And by that, I mean, be more intentional about what we do, be more thoughtful, be hopefully sprinkling in some research here and there. But I think it does, to your point, leave the door wide open for kind of anyone to just wake up in the morning and write an article and invent some new method, or take an old method and rename it, and then it's the trendy thing, of the week. So, for example, I've worked with so many people. I've seen so many resumes, so many portfolios, everything. And one theme I notice is that a lot of people put emphasis on methodologies. So I'm good at design sprints or design thinking or the double diamond process and things like that. It's like a nurse doesn't put their good at CPR on their resume because my sister's an ICU nurse, and I always try and think of these analogies. It's like, why do we put these basic things on our resume? I think it's because A, of all the confusion, but B, this assumption that I'm not even sure why, to be honest, but when I started to see whiteboarding and sketching on resumes, I thought, we have a problem here. I mean, sometimes I just think our field should be named to like logic or something, because so many of these people take time to learn software and memorize, the latest human-centered design graphic that someone's created. But if you were to try and have a discussion that required critical thinking and logic, I'm not sure that they could follow along. I feel like that's really pessimistic, but also we have really lost the element of critical thinking, I think.
That's controversial, lost the element of critical thinking.
Well, I think I would back it up with the fact that it's about critical thinking, and it's about the ability to explain the what and the why of what you've done. Because this is at the core of what a resume and a portfolio is all about, right? We know people hiring these people don't just want to see the pretty screen at the end, or, the amazing outcome of reducing a bounce rate on a checkout or something. They want to know the process. And I think, obviously, I spend too much time in this niche of resumes and portfolios because I think about this so much. But the resounding theme that comes up for me is I think a lot of these portfolios are lacking because people truly can't explain what they did and why they did it. They just were given an assignment or a project from their boss or from their boot camp, and then they looked at the IDEO or design sprint process they decided to follow, and it's like, okay, let me tick the box. I did some sketching, then I did a survey to, some people, and then I did some low fidelity things, but I don't think they were truly thinking about it. I think that they were just checking boxes of a proverbial process.
That sounds incredibly like my entire life.
Good. I was thinking, gosh, that sounded so cynical.
No. So my students who are just graduating now are going to be listening to this and going, oh, he's talking about me. We see some fantastic work and you go, wow, you guys have nailed it. And those ones you're so proud of, and they do exactly what you're talking about, explaining, justifying the what and the why. And there's some you're going, just, right, you're using crazy eights, great.
Yes.
Why? What else could you have done? Could you have just sketched randomly, chucked them in a hat and then drawn a picture out? Is that a good idea? Probably not, but why isn't it a good idea?
Yeah. I love that you brought up crazy eights because I'm certain I've tweeted about crazy eights. I didn't know what crazy eights was until maybe the last 3 years. And I saw it in someone's portfolio. And I was thinking to myself, what is crazy eights? I didn't know. And then I realized it's part of the design sprint process. And the same thing, this maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will. A couple of years ago, I had never heard of the double diamond process. And for full disclosure, I have no formal education in user experience or design or anything. I have a degree in marketing, mainly because I thought I need to get a university degree or my parents are going to kill me. So, I didn't have that background, but I think that's a great example of how just we have this whole generation of people who are obsessed with memorizing diagrams and processes and then can't explain their design decisions to their manager or stakeholders. And then that's why they get into these roles and I think end up feeling like they're being pushed around because they are pushed around because they're not good at pushing back and explaining what they did.
Now, think about Double Diamond. I'll tell you this. I can't remember when I first came to it.
Tell me what you really think.
I think I was already on my PhD, or I was either halfway through, or I was somewhere at that level. So I wasn't completely thick. But I was looking at this going, this isn't as intuitive as they say it is. And the most freeing experience I've had with design thinking was ditching Double Diamond and moving on to going, right, here's some milestones. The first thing, is this the right kind of solution? Second, after that, right, how do we deliver that solution? Right, we got to that point. After that, right, how's it going to look? And when I saw it as milestones, and there's activities you can do inside the milestones and iterations inside. Just keep going round and round and round until you're ready to move on. That's almost, I imagine it like a series of waves crashing on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that was logical and freeing. But I'm sure someone else will hear this and go, what are you talking about? I guess if the mindset is the most important part, how can I express that in my portfolio, which is very limited on space, more pictorial than verbal, and you've got attention span of a few seconds to grab the reader?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the big myths about portfolios, especially for those coming in at more of the, let's say, entry level, for lack of a better word, I think dovetailing nicely off this discussion we just had about process is that many people assume that the portfolio and each project in the portfolio must show every step of the double diamond process or human-centered design process, because so many portfolios, you've probably seen these ones, it starts out and 1 or 2 pages into it, there is the double diamond diagram or there is the whatever diagram. And my recommendation, like, for example, if you are more of a, let's say, experience and interface visual designer. So in other words, you have no plans to conduct research. You don't want, it's not like you don't respect research. You just don't want to do that. You'd rather make pixel perfect things and design systems. Okay. So does your portfolio need to include one-on-one usability testing? No. I mean, why would that make sense, right? But it would be a nice to have if you're good at that. But if you want to be a visual designer, and to be really clear, we're talking pixel perfect design systems, etc., then, because I've had this happen, people like that come to me and say, but I don't have a research project or a research step in my portfolio, so I'm going to go make one up. And I always say, well, why would you spend time on that? Like, it's not a good use of time. But I think there's this overarching belief that the portfolio must show every step of the insert name of process here. So that's mistake number one. But kind of to your question of how do you show the depth without throwing the person reading it into the deep end, right? That really goes back to partially content strategy and design. So the people that work with me, the first thing we do not go into Keynote or PowerPoint or whatever they're going to make their portfolio in. We write it out in a Google Doc, and they may end up with a 2,000 word document about a project. Does that mean that every word makes it into the portfolio? No, that would be too much text. But in order to get down to, and I'm making these numbers up, the 600 words, and to remind everyone, I'm not saying a portfolio project needs to be 600 words because people will take that literally. So to get down to the short version, you need to have the full story, right? It's like if we have the show Shark Tank, you guys have Dragon's Den, I think,
Absolutely.
Right? So I have a couple of friends that have been on that show, and to get a segment that's 10 or 15 minutes long, they might film for 2 to 3 hours, I think. So that's my point here too. So you need to see the full picture to then get down to the smaller version. And that's really kind of the content side of things. And then the design side of things is, and this is where, I mean, I could go off the deep end a little, because it all comes back to basic visual design principles and the concepts of hierarchy and balance and contrast and alignment and basic grids, all of which so many UX people do not understand. And let's use the example of hierarchy. So imagine you're looking at a slide in Keynote or PowerPoint, and everything is the same font size. There's no hierarchy. And to achieve hierarchy, you take 2 sentences and make the font size 20 instead of 12 and bold it, and now you have hierarchy. To me, that's just basic. But to your question earlier of where are, education programs may be failing, part of it is all these fundamentals. Like we should not be memorizing double diamond and, memorizing exactly how to conduct a crazy eights or dot voting. We should be teaching things like hierarchy, because every single week I review portfolios for people in my programs. And even though I teach this in my program, they still miss it. And basic things like that will then make the whole portfolio and resume and every other document you create for the rest of your life. If you can master these basic principles, it makes it more readable, more scannable, etc. You probably see this with the assignments your students give you, right? I mean, the lack of making things readable and easy to skim and scan is truly mind-blowing to me.
I see this in everything. It's like once you realize something and you look at the world and go, oh God, everything's badly done.
Yes.
So I was in a conference yesterday about teaching pedagogy in university. So really incredible, intelligent people everywhere. And at one point I was like, this is old news what we're talking about here. There's simple solutions to all this stuff. We just follow simple basic design rules. So what typeface is it? Verdana. What size? Size 12 minimum. What's doing headings? Mm-hmm. They're either bold or they're different size. How do you know they're different with the different colours? And it's like, well, if you do that, blah, 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 it carries on.
Yes.
And this is just I remember learning this stuff 2003 in my undergrad. Mm-hmm. And so I know what you're saying about how it carries on. It's important in your career. But if there's so many people in UX who don't have those traditional graphic design skills,
mm-hmm.
how can they be successful in UX?
Well, I think they need to learn it. And I think that this is kind of, I think I always knew this in the back of my head, but now that I have a bit of white space in my mind, and because my business is no longer in its infancy in terms of this like world of career coaching that I've created, I think that what I do is not just about your portfolio, resume, et cetera, because I've now had people come to me and say, I've landed my second and third job after working with you and applying what you teach. And it also helps them once they are hired, because when you learn these principles, guess what? You can make a more coherent presentation about your user research findings that you did. You can more succinctly explain why you did things to your colleagues that you work with and why you made these decisions. So how do we teach this, or how do you be successful? I think that's really one of the answers to the questions of how do you stand out from the sea of candidates that are out there right now? Because it's interesting. I wrote this article a couple of weeks ago, and it was more just, I think, selfishly because I was so frustrated about this topic, but really the topic of how UX education, not all of it, but a lot of it, is really just become a business. And you have people who did not work in UX creating UX boot camps because they see dollar signs, because they see a problem of companies want to hire more UX people. They say they can't find them. We think the problem is education. Let's make boot camps. And it's the copycat effect of startups, right? You see General Assembly and Career Foundry and all that. So some person wakes up and think they'll make a boot camp. You also have a situation where it is seemingly so easy to make a quote online course because a lot of technology exists, or not technology, platforms, software exists now. You literally have people who have just graduated from boot camps within the past 12 to 18 months, spinning up their own boot camp programs, which I won't name them, but I definitely follow some of them. And I know this personally because I've had my own students literally try and sell my own online courses on the same platform that I use. And so I think it's a muddy combination of entrepreneurs seeing it as a business opportunity, UX people who either can't get hired or want some extra income, think they're going to make a boot camp and like get rich. And it's a problem. And I don't know how to fix it because I'm too busy focusing on the niche of people who are in the realm of going into the job search or want to be ready for a job search. But I think it's kind of, I think it's a elephant in the room type topic. And I know many, like Jared Spool has the Center program, and programs like that you're in are really great as well. And I think it's just, it's not something we're going to solve quickly.
I think it's not helped by that. Employers don't tend to know what UX is. We started earlier saying UX is the Wild West, and there's all these things out there.
Yes.
You try and pin down what UX is, we have a long debate, but employers kind of see it and go, oh yeah, you can have some of that, you do it, you're competent, and that muddies the water. I assume that the quality courses, the quality content providers, and the kind of thought leaders, they can only survive if their quality is good. You can only recycle the same thing so much until you've run out or people get bored with you and moved on. But if you genuinely are innovative and know what you're talking about, you can be reactionary and keep going. I know the feeling of, what's it called? We recently expanded our UX course in Loughborough from being just a master's to being an MSc. And for me, because I was one of the pioneers of that process, there's a moral dimension we're all feeling going, we could just make it bigger and slap a name on it and say, yeah, it's a course, come and spend a lot of money, frankly. It is a big investment. We could just do that, right? Can we sell it? Yeah, we can sell it. We can do this, but it's wrong to just do it. You got to do it right. You got to give someone this quality so that in 20 years' time, they can look back and go, that was a great investment on where I am now. And the only way we can do that is like doing this podcast, being people like you, engagement industry, constantly having this, what if I'm wrong moments, and constantly improving. But hey, this is not my soapbox. My soapbox is for another day, another show. This is about you. So
it's like therapy almost.
Oh God, sometimes.
Design
therapy. Back on what you started with, saying that you don't have a formal background in UX. You started with a degree and master's. So where did your knowledge and experience in UX come from?
That is a great question. I mean, formally, I guess we can start with how I got into this field. I was lucky to be exposed to graphic design at an early age. We always had a computer in my house, since computers were more accessible. I typed my letters to Santa Claus on a computer, and and then I was always just artistic and kind of had an affinity for technology. And because I could type very quickly, I was asked to be in charge of my newsletter in elementary school for the school. And that involved learning Corel Draw. Did you ever use Corel Draw?
Oh, God.
So old. I mean, we're talking the mid-90s, like 1995 or something. And anyway, long story short, I was exposed to graphic design. I kind of just dabbled in graphic design after high school. I was lucky to kind of work at a little web design agency. And then I was given a copy of Photoshop 3 and Dreamweaver 4 and said, learn how to use this. And I really just taught myself. And I was lucky in that I worked, again, at a really small type agency where I was exposed to a little bit of coding. Like I used to be able to do some very basic cold fusion and HTML and all this. And then at one point, I just thought to myself, well, actually, I read the book with the polar bear on it that Lou Rosenfeld, and I forget the other author's name, wrote. I think it's called Information Architecture for the World Wide Web. I read that book. It's by O'Reilly or published by O'Reilly. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. That's what makes sense to me. It's all about organizing information and this and that. And then it was just, I'm still learning. It was this whole process of just constantly learning, asking questions, not being afraid what people thought of my questions or, be perceived as the dumbest person in the room. But thinking back to what were the underlying qualities that I think make me really good at what I do, I've always been really creative. I've always been very inquisitive. You can't do that. Well, why? Or why not? I've always been kind of looking at the world around me, solving problems, trying to understand people, all that stuff. And I was interested in journalism. I was going to become a neuroscientist. So in hindsight, I see how all of those interests and strengths inform what I do now. But to go back to your question, like, how do you teach critical thinking? I took a critical thinking in college because it was required. And I thought, oh, this is so stupid, because to me, it's just like part of my wiring. So it's tricky.
Yeah, I'm hoping that you're just going to drop a truth bomb and say, this is how you teach critical thinking. Everyone listen up.
I think, I have this phrase I say because so many UX people are obsessed in a little bit of an odd way with problem solving, like it's some badge of honor. I'm a problem solver. Probably 80% of bios on LinkedIn say, I love solving problems. I want to make the world a better place. It's like, okay, I've read that 500 times today. But I think more interesting than problem solving is the precursor, which is problem spotting. And I think once you get into that habit of noticing the world around you, connecting the dots, thinking, well, why does it have to be this way? Why doesn't it have to be this way? Just yesterday, I was flying back. I was in New York City and I flew back to where I live. And now I can't think of any concrete examples, but I do remember a few moments during the day where I was thinking, this makes no sense, or this is like the most confusing thing. Buying tickets actually at one of the train stations because someone came up to me and wanted help. And I walked them through. And as I was walking them through very slowly, I was thinking, this is confusing. This is ridiculous. This should be over here. But it's not until we kind of slow down enough to just, I think it's really about slowing down and noticing and being more mindful. And that's hard in this fast-paced world we live in, where we love to be 3 steps ahead in every conversation and everything we do, So be a problem spotter.
Yeah, I always like to think, why can't this be perfect? Like, you get in a car
Yeah.
and it's the latest BMW where everything go, why can't this be different? And then you start going, this is frustrating. But if we're always getting these problem spotting and trying to make things better, in your career, in starting out with Portfolio Formula, now in the Strategy Lab, what has been the hardest lessons and the hardest problems to overcome?
Thinking about it through the lens of like it being a business, you mean? I wanted to point out just the origin of all this, because the origin of all of this, which was a total accident that I became this designer founder type, whatever I am. But it really all came down to problem spotting, because in 2017, my inbox, every single week, I'd get emails, how do I make a portfolio? And I had a little folder on my email that I just put them into and planned to reply someday. And, I got tired of writing the same thing over and over. And then the volume of the same question, how do I make a portfolio, came in, or the volume kept increasing. And so I kind of had this problem spotting moment where I thought, wait a minute, I don't need to keep typing the same email over and over and wasting time on this. I'm going to teach a 45-minute workshop over lunch someday. And then I thought, maybe I should charge for this and see what happens. And that was literally the genesis of this. And it sold out. I think it sold upwards of 80 tickets, in days. Then I had a wait list of something like 200 or 300 people. Then I taught this class. I didn't even make the class. I waited to see how many tickets it sold. And I thought if it only sells 5, I just will refund everyone. And anyway, long story short, I taught it. People loved it. They started to get hired. And then they said, this was awesome. Instead of it being, an hour-long class and kind of a 4-minute or 4-week pop-up Facebook group, can you make this like 4 weeks of teaching? And I thought, of course I could do that, and I'll charge a lot more. So that was really the beginning of it. But none of this would have happened if I had not recognized that as a problem, right? So thinking about because now it's almost been 5 years, which blows my mind. What have the hardest parts been? I think the hardest parts have really been in becoming a CEO, which still I think it's weird that I'm the CEO, but I'm getting ready to hire some people now. And it's no longer just kind of Sarah's company. There's other people, right? So I think finding that balance between my role as a CEO, my desire to have a wonderful user experience, and balancing that with sales and marketing. So this is an awesome example. You have probably had this experience. You go to a website, you give them your email address, and then they start emailing you. Sometimes it's once a week. Sometimes it might be once a day for a week, depending on what you're signing up for. That is, in the world of sales and marketing, an email marketing funnel where basically you say you're interested in a topic, and then they give you free value over email and eventually pitch you a product. It's part of our everyday life. And for some reason, I think people are okay with it if it's coming from their favorite clothing brand or something like that. But just the other day, someone emailed me to complain that I sent them too many emails after they signed up for a bunch of free resources I have online. And then after they signed up for my free resources, I sent them an email a day for, 4 or 5 or 6 days, and then told them about my paid products. And they got mad at me. I said, okay, well, here is the balance. They said it's not a good user experience and almost shamed me. Like, you're a big user experience designer. How can you have such a bad? It was really like that. And I receive this maybe once a quarter. And I'm like, I understand your point, but if you were also a CEO in charge of sales and marketing, you would understand this balance. And I've worked in enough startups to, there are compromises that have to be made. And I'm sure many UX people would debate me on this and say, it's user first, it's user first. And I say, well, there are no users and there is no business if we're not selling things. So finding that balance is tricky, but I also love it because it keeps me always learning.
Mm-hmm. I guess there's this real balance between you're going to get grumpy people.
Yes, that too.
There's distribution curves. There's people who are super chilled, who are super grumpy. But at the very end of those distributions, they get extreme. And you can't react too much to that one person until the masses, and it gets a bit more.
Yeah.
How does it feel having this transition into CEO world?
Yeah, it's one of the things I swore I would never do, hire employees, but I realize in order to keep up with the demand for this program and service I provide, I need to hire more people, because just since June, when I launched this larger career strategy lab program, I just counted and I've done 140 critiques of individual resumes or portfolios or LinkedIn profiles. That's a lot of critiques for one person. So I need to hire these people. And I think what keeps me motivated is when I receive testimonials that say, I went from making $52,000 American to $125,000 American, and this person had 3 to 5 years of experience. And that is I'm not exaggerating. I get testimonials of people double their salary all the time. And that's life-changing, especially when you think, I'm kind of a numbers person, and I think, wow, so now they can save more for retirement or pay off debt or this and that. And it compounds over the course. It's truly changing the trajectory of their career and their life, and their family's life if they have family or partners.
Yeah, that's one of the best sound bites I've ever had. So thank you for that. Congratulations.
It's amazing. I mean, I hadn't, I just thought, I'm teach people how to make portfolios and solve my own problem of not wanting to talk about portfolios every day. But here we are.
So in this world of UX careers, what do you think is more critical? Is it the skills you've got and your smarts, or is it how you market yourself?
I think it's both. Because you could ask the same question of a product, right? A product could have all the amazing features and solve great problems, but if it's not marketed well, no one will know about it, or the right people may not know about it. So you have to have the combination of both. And I think that element of marketing and selling yourself and quote, packaging up your skills and experience, that's hard for people, because if you are not naturally inclined to kind of toot your own horn and, sell yourself, that's something you have to learn. It can be learned, but especially maybe if you're more of an introvert, it could seem awkward and uncomfortable. But all of that can definitely be learned. I think too, it also involves the awareness of what you are good at versus of everything you can do. How do you pick and choose and curate the things that matter for the job you want in the next 6 months, And on the flip side, be able to identify for the job that you want in 6 months or 3 years from now, what are the skills that you need to acquire between now and then, And that's where that whole, coming back for full circle, that's where that whole notion of this career roadmap is. And really, it's like a product roadmap, except it's for you, because you are a product. It's like the product of you. Companies are hiring you to do a job, right? In the same way that I hire a product or buy a product at the store to do a job for me, it's the same thing. And I used to teach this course called The Product of You. I taught it maybe 2 or 3 times, and people loved it because it really did a lot of what we're talking about. And now it's all rolled into this career strategy lab. But yeah.
Do you think the kind of people that are drawn to UX are the kind of people that are that more don't want to market themselves?
I don't know about that. That's a good question. I'm trying to think really quickly about the types of people I have worked with. I think anecdotally, if I had to decide right now, I would say I don't think it's necessarily about the types of people that are drawn to user experience, because I think that there are plenty of people that are confident or were confident in their skills and experience. However, the resounding theme, whether someone has 0 years of experience, 15 plus years of experience, resounding theme is lack of confidence, feeling like an imposter, thinking they're going to be found out, that they're not really qualified, even though they've been doing research for 15 years. And that problem of confidence and not lingering, like overwhelming imposter thoughts and things like that. I think that affects everyone. And part of it, I think, is this constant comparison that we put upon ourselves. And we're comparing ourselves to people without understanding the context of that person. So for example, your students have probably done this. They go on Twitter or Medium or YouTube or something, and they see someone's portfolio or case study. And then they feel down about themselves and that they're a failure and they'll never get hired again. But maybe you're a researcher and that person is a visual designer, and you're thinking to yourself, that portfolio looks amazing. It's so much better. And it's like, yes, it's going to be better than yours because that person has been doing visual design for the past 6 years. And you are just learning the ins and outs of Keynote or something, So I think this constant comparison-itis that is rampant is contributing to that confidence issue that you kind of asked about, I think, in the original question. And confidence in marketing yourself.
Yeah. So someone's coming to you with kind of imposter syndrome, the feeling that they're just not really, that they might be on that 50K job and they want that 125K job, but they feel they don't deserve it. How do you help them overcome that issue?
So part of it really involves this methodical process that we go through of, first of all, I use the word career roadmap, but it's really about auditing your career so far to help them be aware of all of their strengths that maybe they were even blind to from this kind of asking of peers, former managers, and reflecting on questions that I give them. It also has to do with auditing the career. Oh, and then the second part of it is the process of creating these, quote, case studies or things that are in their portfolio and going beyond the surface of, I did usability testing, and then here are some screenshots of the SurveyMonkey, survey I did or something, and going beyond that and having them explain what they did, why they did that, and what happened. That very act gives them the confidence in what they did, right? Because for someone might have in their portfolio or on their resume, conducted usability testing. Okay, that's great. But if I ask you questions of, was it with 5 participants or 50? Was it for a complicated user flow, like a checkout with adding and removing credit cards and gift cards and all this? Or was it for like a static about page? I mean, that's very different. So when you can help people see and honestly remember what the heck they did, that alone gives them the confidence, and that confidence translates to the interviews and the resume, and when they might cold reach out to someone on LinkedIn, et cetera, because that feedback of confidence is like at least once or twice a week, I'm receiving feedback like that from people that work with me.
So you're clearly helping many people achieve their dreams. That must feel fantastic.
It's true. And like I said, I mean, I don't know if I would say I'm a natural entrepreneur. The business side I've had to learn, but it really was a little bit of an accident, but it shouldn't be that much of a surprise because of that constant noticing, critical thinking, spotting problems, putting together the dots. And, hindsight is 20/20, but this would make a good conference talk, but I actually did do a conference talk about how this all came to be a few years ago.
So what do you feel your greatest contribution to the world has
been? I think it really has to do with 2 things. First of all, this whole career side of things. I mean, to the point of that testimonial, or I received another one. I forget the exact numbers, but it was over 100% increase in salary. And this person emailed me and told me this, and literally, I'm paraphrasing, but some keywords from the quote were that I went home and told my fiance and my family, or his parents or something, and we were all crying. And I was like, that is incredible, And it truly is life-changing for people. So I think it's less to the industry, and it's more about changing individual people one at a time, and then hoping that they, through the course of their career, are able to, become a manager and impart more of these soft skills that I think, which is not the greatest word, but, some of these less tangible things, less process-driven things, more kind of, soft skills, for lack of a better word. I think the other contribution would be just through a lot of the free resources and YouTube videos and articles and things, because a lot of people email me and say things along the lines of like, thank you for demystifying this, or like, you're kind of just no BS content. And I think it's really a breath of fresh air for people in a sea of content that is often, I don't know, I think we just make this all a lot more confusing than it needs to be. And like I said in the beginning, sometimes I think this is just all about thinking logically, thinking critically, and thinking more mindfully, and maybe slowing down a little to do this rather than hustling to memorize, every step of whatever process has been made up this week.
And that's a great way of thinking about it. I like how it's an individual impact rather than a industry.
Yeah.
So what do you think the future's going to hold for you?
Oh my goodness, good question. I would be very curious myself. I think there's a world where I continue doing exactly what I'm doing right now and grow that. I see a world where I could get into some trying to make a dent in the problem of how companies have really messed up the hiring process for UX professionals. I think even outside of UX, I think the hiring process is pretty crazy. So there could be a world where I step into something in that part of this niche I find myself in. There could be a world where, this one's interesting, it's kind of scary, but there could be a world where I look at what I've created and think to myself, this is not just about UX. I could take this and have accountants or pastry chefs going through this, because everyone, you take the portfolio out of it, not everyone needs a portfolio, but everything else literally applies to everyone else's careers. That's a little scary to me, because then it's almost like there is such a massive market. I might write a book someday. What else? UX education is interesting to me. I think the last thing that the world needs is another UX boot camp, which is what everyone wants me to make. I'm not going to do that. I did that. Did you know back in 2011, a friend of mine, a colleague I've collaborated with for a decade, General Assembly approached us and we created their first ever UX immersion 12-week or whatever it was, boot camp. And it was, I don't know if it was the first, but it was their first. And I loved that. But that's a huge undertaking. So I don't know. There's many paths.
If you ever want to write a book, let me know and we'll sort of team up on this.
Yeah, I actually did write a book last year. It's kind of on the shelf right now. It's not about UX careers or portfolios, anything. It more takes the idea of how research is all about context. And I think that everyone's lives would be easier if everyone understood how to find the context faster. So it's more a book for the masses about context, which I still might do something with it, but I took a break to make this world of helping people with their careers.
Oh, that makes total sense. I had this problem. I was speaking to consultants, I was speaking to people in industry, students, speaking to researchers, and the one thing they're all messing up on was sample size. Like you say about justifying what you're doing. So you're running a usability test and you got 6 people, right? Why? Well, because Nielsen 2001 said 6 people.
Oh, yes.
Like, well, yeah, well, that was nice 20 years ago. What about now? So I wrote this quick book, Sample Size for Design Research, which is available on Amazon. Go check it out. And it just was a simple answer to a simple question. What's the sample size you need? And it's good. The second edition I'm working on now, which expands it and goes into much more comprehensive territory, that's taken a shelf because you realize as much as I want to get this done, there's all these other things to do and life is finite. So we're getting to the end of our time and want to sort of thank you for sharing your thoughts and sharing your inner mind. My last question, Sarah, is what do you feel would make the world a better place?
I think it goes back to my book, which maybe this is a sign or something, because I think the world could benefit. And I think this is why I went down this journey of this book. I think the world could benefit if everyone could just kind of understand the context of where we are coming from in our personal lives, in our business interactions, in our romantic lives, in relationships with children, with everything. I think context is so crucial, and we jump to conclusions so fast, and everyone's kind of not really listening a lot of time, it seems like these days, and forming the next tweet or Instagram post or rebuttal they're going to give. And yeah, I think the world needs more context, which is not sexy, but maybe you're telling me I need to finish my book. I'll have to maybe I'll send you a blurb after this or something. But I think it comes from just all of the research I've done and seeing how that context is so crucial for building products, and why couldn't we extrapolate that to our day-to-day life?
It sounds fascinating, and it'd be my pleasure to read your blurb.
All right, I will have to go on a hunt for the Google Doc and see where the heck it is these days. It's somewhere in the cloud.
So Sarah, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I love this conversation.
Thank you once again to Sarah for joining us on the podcast. Listening back to our conversation, it's been inspirational and has really changed a lot of the ideas that I had for 2022 and beyond. So I hope that all of you listening have gained as much as I have out of this. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave the feedback on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you leave your podcasts, and tell your friends about it. Subscribing and spreading the word is the best way that you can support the show. And I really can't wait to hear what you've thought about it and hear your stories. Until next time, I've been Dr. Chris Parker. I'll see you later on.